everyone. I just want to say I see all of your comments in the chat. I appreciate all of you, and I really do appreciate you, Ed, for putting this together and being so patient with me as well. So.
No, it's been a lot of fun to teach you all the .NETs and SignalR things all at one time. Like I said, this is deep end of the pool for you for sure.
Well, very cool. Well, we are off for the day. We're going to go have some lunch, but have a marvelous evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time it is for you. So.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. We're getting the old like people looking at their watch like,
chat
are you gonna show up?
Never fails to make me laugh. Like I'm over here just rolling. Thank you for that. Oh, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. Hi.
Is this the Truman Show? Let me guess, another old man reference. Like, what's the Truman Show?
Love that movie.
Okay,
love that movie.
It was reality TV before reality TV. That was a fun one.
Oh, welcome to day 4. Yes. Roman numerals throw me through a loop. I just want to tell you that. We've got like an agenda, and I'm the one who chose to use the Roman numerals, so that's on me. But I'm like, Ivy.
I need to talk to your husband. I really need to. I believe he has a list of things. He probably keeps it in his back pocket of things that confuse Alyssa, like Roman numerals. Do not use those.
He's actually one of the biggest like pranksters, and so he uses that list often to just try and get me in a bind. So yeah, no, he definitely has.
Yeah, I do that as well. So my wife is very she's very attentive to time. So which is ironic considering we were 2 minutes late coming in the show. So she always has like an eye line to a clock. So there used to be one on top of our TV when TVs were not like thin, like big TVs.
Yeah.
And I would place things in front of the clock on purpose. And she would get mad. So she would go move that thing out from in front of my clock. So I'd purposely like pick up another item and then like swap the items out. Put like a glass of water in front of it, take away the other widget, and then like 10 minutes would go by and she'd be like, why is there a glass of water in front of my clock?
Oh my goodness. Well, sorry about that for the lateness, chat. We love you. We would never purposely grieve you by being late.
So what are we here for?
Our streaming. We've been building Crazy 8s, a game with SignalR throughout the week, and having guests every day. And so super excited about today's guests. We've had really killer guests throughout the week. So check out the recordings. I think they're already
We've had amazing guests. We've had 2 Microsoft folks and 2 Microsoft MVPs. So bring our second Microsoft person is here today. So Brady Gaster is here. He's a principal program manager over at Microsoft. So we should go ahead and just bring him into the show. Welcome, Brady.
How's it going?
Yay.
Hey.
Oh my goodness.
So we're going to talk more about SignalR today, but you are very close to SignalR yourself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Microsoft?
Sure. I'm probably the original SignalR fanboy. I've had a lot of debates with Griff about this, and I think I presented it to him before he presented it to me. So I'm going to take.
I mean, if there's not documentation.
But I started working on SignalR prior to my job at Microsoft. I was doing some hacks with it and whatnot. I don't know how to get links onto the Twitch show, so I'll paste them in here to your private chat, and then you can pop them back out. But I dropped in the first post I ever wrote on it, which was kind of had this wacky idea to start learning about Azure. The irony. I started tinkering with Service Bus, and I used Service Bus and SignalR together to build what I called the Connect Monitor. And the idea was we had a dog in the house, and like the dog would set off the alarm. And like, I think it was something like the cops could come to your house 4 times. And then like the next time it was going to be like a $500 charge, and the video is broken, so I apologize. But essentially I thought, wouldn't it be better if you had a alarm system that could pick up whether a human was in your house? So I used the Connect to kind of pick up a skeletal tracker, and then it would like set an alarm. And essentially what it would do is take a picture and send the picture up to Service Bus and save it in storage, and then refresh the picture on like a web page with SignalR. It's really funny. I got to Microsoft shortly after I wrote that post, and I was doing my very first interview with two of my personal heroes, Damien and David, and I just dropped in that link there. If don't please don't watch that show, because I was like, it was like, if you met Mick Jagger, I was completely nervous, and I was like so excited because I was like just learning SignalR. I was brand new to Microsoft, and I was a lot thinner. We were in the show, and it was really funny. Damien starts, like, I said something about he does this move shape thing where he like clicks his face and he moves it around, and it moves around in another screen. And he said he just looks at David and he goes like, I saw this weird thing of like a guy that did something with a Connect and SignalR, and it was like taking pictures and like all this weird stuff. And like David's looking at him, and he like points like this, and Damien goes, "That was you." So that was a pretty fun show.
So for anybody that's ever been recorded and put on what we equate to television or YouTube, I think we've all had that moment. And if you've ever seen Saturday Night Live's Chris Farley show,
oh yeah,
like we've all had that moment where you're being interviewed or interviewing somebody, and you're like, you remember that one time? That was awesome. Like that's how I feel every time I do one of these shows, actually.
That's fun. But
I can relate.
That's cool. Yeah, that's how I got started with this whole journey. I actually owe my career at Microsoft to SignalR, because I think I don't think they would have found me if I hadn't done that crazy post. So that's kind of first thing I did, and I've been working on it ever since then. I took a little bit of a break from it when I went and did some other things outside of the .NET community, but in the meantime, Anthony Chu came in, and he was the new SignalR cheerleader. We've always had Griffin out there, so there's that. But it's a fun tech. It's just it gets people excited. It tends to be a little bit more of an Uber hammer than it probably ought to be, but it's a lot of fun to work with, and the team is fantastic.
So I did presentation about 9-10 years ago when this was in beta as well, and it wasn't intended to be like a SignalR presentation. It was supposed to be a responsive web design presentation. And I put together this presentation where like it had multiple buttons on a page, but the only button you would see is whatever your mobile device corresponded to. So you'd have like an iPhone button, an Android button, and so on. And like I'd go into these conferences and pull up the projection, and it would display like a real-time graph of everybody in the room signing in with their device, and it would show like we have this many iPhone users and this many Android users and so on. And people were so enamored with that presentation they forgot what they were there for. And they're like, the responsive web design thing, I don't know what that's all about, but how did you do that real-time graph? Like that was so cool. So it kind of like took over my presentation, but it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. That's pretty awesome. I gave the first Microsoft presentation I gave. It was really scary because I had folks like Robert Green and Brian Keller, Glenn sitting in the front row. They were just sitting there like,
Oh my God, not the arm cross.
Oh my God, I was terrified. So, and I got it was in Michigan. What's it called? The water park. Code Mash? Yeah, it was at Code Mash. And I locked in the presentation and then got the job. So I'm in there, and there was this one little kind of a bit that I would do where, SignalR used to be this thing where it was like really made a lot of use of like C# dynamics, which at the time was kind of like a religious thing in the .NET community. And I was giving the presentation, and I used to kind of do this bit where I would say, I never really understood the concept of dynamics in C# or why I would use them until I started using SignalR. And it's like, well, I don't have the serialization stuff. I don't have tight specificity. So I can just throw whatever I want over the wire. It's like, it makes sense, you know? So I was like, I give the presentation and I was like, anybody in the room have a problem with like .NET? One hand goes up. I was like,
oh no,
bro, I'm really sorry. Like, we're going to talk about it a lot today, you know? So I would like go through and I would say, so I want to type dynamic. Sorry, guy. You know, and I would like totally like reference him, you know what I mean? Like it was like my gag, you know, for like an hour, you know, so probably 11, 12 times I'd reference the guy. And it got pretty bad. Like I started saying, you know, dynamic guy, I'm really sorry. Here we go again. You know, so you guys know who Drew Robbins is? He's a, you know, pretty long-standing, respected figure in the evangelism community at Microsoft.
I'm assuming that was Drew Robbins.
He's awesome. It wasn't Drew Robbins.
Oh, okay.
Drew Robbins was one of the people in the front row. Like, he's gonna blow this up, you know what I mean? So Drew comes up to me and he says, hey, do you know dynamic guy? Like you see one of your homies or something? And I said, I have no idea who that guy is, man. He goes, oh man, that's John Skeet.
Oh jeez.
So I got in touch with John after. I was like, I'm really sorry.
What did he say? Was he like?
He was cool. He was really cool. He like wrote a blog post about it. He was like, you know, after like the 11th time, I was starting to get a little irritated, but he's a nice guy. So that's really embarrassing.
That's great.
So, John, I'm still sorry. It's been 10 years, but I'm still sorry. So, yeah. Don't do that. Don't pick on John for dynamic.
So we were actually talking about this the other day or yesterday on the stream, and Alyssa is new to .NET, so some of these concepts are a little bit foreign. And she's like, "Are you just going to create a class for everything?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of what we do." Like,
frustrated. I had a conversation with my husband last night because I was like, "Listen, Ed wouldn't create an object, and this thing needed to be an object." And he was all, "Oh, let's make a class." And I was like, "Ed, make this an object." And Ed was like, "This is an object." And I was like, and my husband was like, "Honey, they don't have like per se." He's like, "I think you need to ask Ed for a dictionary." And so I have been bequeathed to ask Ed for a dictionary.
Like an dictionary? Or a dictionary?
Uh-oh. The rails have come off now.
But yeah, that just goes to show. Sometimes I get confused because I'm like, why can't you just do this? And then my husband's like, that's JavaScript. I'm like, right. So
well, if you don't like making classes because JavaScript, you should look at, I didn't either, by the way. You should look at C# records. Have you heard about these?
No, tell me more.
We talked a little bit about them, but we didn't write any. So
they're cool. Like instead of doing like, Ed's probably finding the doc right now, so I'll talk through it.
Actually, I was going to bring up the project we're working on and see if we can convert something to essentially to a record.
Essentially, you take your entire class and you make it look like a method. And instead of having like public class person, you have public record person. And instead of having a semicolon with a bunch of properties underneath it, you have an open paren with a bunch of parameters. So it ends up looking more like a constructor, if you will, but it actually does create a class.
So one of the things I think we could do this with is our card, because a playing card. So that the idea of records, from what I understand, is they are supposed to help with mutability as well. So a record is more, you don't want that thing to change. It's supposed to be immutable. If you want to change it, you create a new one, type of a thing. So it kind of goes to a functional programming type of a perspective, in my opinion. I like that. So if we wanted to take this card class and turn this into a record, what would the steps for that be?
I'm getting you a doc right now. I believe I'm looking at Bill's docs. I'm pasting it into the chat window for you too. I believe that what you would do here is literally type public record card. And then open.
Actually, we should probably call it card 2 record. Just until we
not squiggle, paren.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Literally take your constructor and just paste it there, and then change it to card two. Card two.
There we go.
There you go. And you need to put a semicolon at the end because it's not JavaScript. Wink, wink.
So we could do that. The only thing I think we'd lose here, well, I don't think the overriding two
That's
string.
pretty sexy.
Yeah, it's cool.
Ed, why you don't like
overriding-
records?
I don't know how we'd override two string. We're not really using it anymore, but that was kind of a proof of concept thing we used.
Right.
And then the state for having it face up or down would probably be in some sort of view model instead, because a record, you're not going to be updating any kind of state inside of it. If you're going to change the state, you'd trash that card and get a new one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't really use a face up or down type of a property in a card or in a record.
Right.
So that's something that's doable with what we're working on, but records do introduce a little bit of that.
So our options are records, classes,
dynamic. You can use dynamic in SignalR.
I was trying to stay away from dynamic, just so
there's something you've been keeping from me.
Just to keep Alyssa grounded, because she will go wild with dynamic, and I think there are, I won't pretend to be as knowledgeable as John Skeet on this, but there are some reservations to doing dynamic.
Yes.
One of those, I think, is they're not as memory performant, right?
I think that is the case, because you don't. I think that is the case. I also think. I don't know. I'm waiting for Halter and Brennan to wake up so I can ask them questions like this. But I have them in the wings over here. I do think there's a little bit cost to pay on the serialization side. I've actually dropped in the What's New in C# link, which has the very first thing in it is records. Bill wrote a bunch of really great articles on records, and you'll see that he has some cool examples in there where like he's actually inheriting using records, which is pretty cool. I read this tutorial and actually did some of this and some API work that I've got. People that are really getting into records posted out a sample web API thing, and like I had 5 or 6 people reply like, you should use records instead of class. Like, I'm just going to use dynamic.
It's the pineapple pizza wars all over again.
Okay, so those are our 3 options when it comes to building things like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. There's nothing else mystical or that Ed's hiding from me.
So a record is a non-mutating type of a class. So it's something that you don't want to use for like application state or something like that. There's also structs.
Yeah, C# Fritz
Jeff
is in
Fritz
the chat. Hi, Fritz.
is in chat. Structs are another thing that we could possibly use. Those are also very memory efficient. So I think class is probably the most common thing you'll see. You could think of this, Alyssa, as the C#'s equivalent to divitis. And HTML developers know what divitis is, I hope. And this is like everything is a div because it does all the things, right? It's the hammer and nail analogy. So you'll see class a lot. Class is like that go-to container for data.
I was chuckling hard because he said XML literals. Okay, I'll go now. I love it. I think it's beautiful. Thank you.
So with classes and structs, one thing that you have to keep in mind is structs pass. Classes pass by reference, and structs pass by value. So if you're moving this data around the application, it behaves a little bit differently. So there's some different coding practices that have to happen, so you don't accidentally lose the data in that container.
Another thing that Ed was like doing awesome, blowing my mind yesterday, really getting this game underway. But it was kind of frustrating because, like I said earlier, he was like, we should have a hub here and a hub here, and you get a hub, and why not you? You also. So could you please show Brady our hubs and us talk about hubitis?
Actually,
boy.
we have one hub.
Oh,
Or we have
what-
two. We have a chat hub and a
it was always
and a game hub.
Remember how you were creating? You changed the magic strings yesterday, and you were getting them flip flopped, and I was getting flip flopped, and it was a nightmare. And I'm like, why do we even need two? Can't they just be one? So I wanted to.
So we
Better if you
have
have one.
yeah, we have
Your
one
life
hub.
is a lot easier.
I think the terminology is getting a little mixed up
Yeah.
with
What am I
Alyssa.
talking about?
We have a hub on the server, and we have the connection on the client. So if we go over to, let's get our project moving here, and we pull up page. Nope, wrong. I'm in the server client pages.
You didn't tell me you were going to have a chat hub. You know I have a rule about chat hub.
Ooh, what's your rule about chat hubs?
I don't do chat demos with SignalR.
Mm.
And
The
I
first
don't
rule
endorse
of Chat
them,
Hub.
And I no longer refer people who do. Kidding.
The first rule of SignalR is
The first rule of being a member in the real-time army is that you have to go further than chat.
So we've got our game here. Let's run it too, so people have
Okay.
a visual of what we're doing. Let's not stare at a blank page. Okay.
Ask Brady about meaty production with SignalR.
Seriously, Visual Studio Code.
What or MIDI? I might be saying that wrong.
It is trying to run the client project and not the server. So
Let's make sure Ed can get this running, and we'll talk about Sampler here in a second.
there we go. That should work better. So we'll pull this guy up, and we have, of course, the obligatory chat, but we also have this table that will become our game. It's going to show a discard pile, or sorry, draw pile, a discard pile, and then we have our clients that connect.
Oh, you're gonna love this.
And we connect to the game so we can join. And now we're connected over here, and we've yet to develop this side. So with that said, what Alyssa's question was about is we have our game client, which spins up a hub connection. And I think this is what she was referring to as the hub. So we have these hub connections, and then we have our hub on the back end here on the server. Split this out. So our hub on the client side here, it's connecting to the hub on the server. The hub on the server has this concept of an iHub, or a hub of T, sorry. And we can use that to kind of strongly type our methods that we're going to call on that client. However, on the reverse side of the coin, I don't believe we have an API that works that way.
Correct.
So what I did instead is I just took the interface and called name of on it. So I've got a strong typed name. It's a little hacky.
That's what people should do. They should not use the stupid string stuff. They should use that. That's good.
So I'm getting a nod of encouragement there. This isn't too hacky.
Yeah, lovely.
I mean, it's better than a string. I don't know if it's the best approach, but it's an approach.
I love it.
But I think Alyssa was kind of wondering why we need all of the things that we have going on. So we can break this down, I guess, I think coming from the perspective of a front-end developer like Alyssa, there's a lot of server-side code going on here.
Yeah, I think it gets muddied because when you start doing something, my brain automatically assumes we're client side. So I think that's the hard part for me to be like, oh right, it's so fascinating to see. Like, there's so many people like that we've seen this week in your industry that have come on and shared, and you all care about this minutia of the server and what's going on and how it works. And I'm like, wow, there's just like it's like a whole new world, and it's a little overwhelming.
I get it. Yeah, the concept count can get a little crazy. And that's actually one of the things that that Fowler and Damien really wanted to kind of abstract away. So when you think about like you want to talk about complexity, just talk about the generic concept of pub sub or messaging. Like it's really, really complicated. So David and Damien were like, let's water that down to 2 words, on and send, or on and invoke, depending on your poison. So on is like you're handling events, and send or invoke is like you sending a thing in. And people would tell me, they would be like, SignalR is really confusing to me. And I'm like, why? They're like, is it just on and send? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, what?
It's like, because you simplified it, it was like way too hard to get at that point.
And like they want to, like, it's really difficult because they keep remembering HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. And it just gets like, it's like a block, you know what I mean? And the first time you like, okay, I'll say it. The first time you build a chat app using SignalR, you're like, I get it. Like, it's fun. You know what I mean?
So we have 2 concepts here. On the server, we've got the hub that all the clients connect to, and that server can send and invoke a procedure on the client.
Where
so
are
the
you
client,
sending or invoking? I see where you're calling on client.
So on the client side, yeah, we're registering a procedure that handles that event when it's called. So we've got 2 kind of core concepts here. So this will send a command to execute something on the client. So the client will respond with, okay, I've got this procedure that needs to run. And then we have a function like down here, join game, that actually runs per the server's demand.
Correct. It's essentially what happens is, like, on your server side, like, think about your like, think about your hub not as like a piece of business logic, but more like a catcher's mitt. It's like it's receiving all the messages that are coming from the server. And that, you know, you talked about, I heard Sam talking about the different protocols, you know, long polling or WebSockets or whatever, you know, like if you think about the concept of a server sent event, you know, it's basically a thing that's listening. And whenever an event happens on the server, it gets the response. So SignalR essentially like abstracts the transport away. So if it's, you know, like Sam talked about, if you've got WebSockets, it uses it. If you don't, it tries long polling. If you don't, or server sent events, if you don't have that, it tries long polling. It abstracts all that away from you, so that like the on and the send is really all you need to worry about until later.
Yeah, I'm going to try one more time here too with another visual. So I think one of the disconnects might be as well, especially thinking from the front end, is there is no visual portion to the server. So you never actually like see the server, right? So I'm just going to use the console as a representation of that server. So let's pretend that the console's running some code of some sort. So if we said this is our server, and we came up and we put in our username here and hit join, what's going to happen is when I click join, the server's receiving a command, and it's running some code, and it's registering that, you know, I joined the game. Then the server communicates over to this screen and gives me the player and runs some code on that screen to add that player to the list and display it. So I think you might kind of be missing this hub. It's abstract. It doesn't have like a physical like view for the server actually doing anything.
Right.
So they're communicating through this abstract channel that you can't see.
Good way to think about it. I'm trying to get y'all something because I think you could use this in your app. Have you ever seen the .NET cards?
I haven't.
I'm trying to get them for you right now. I have them stored somewhere. I just shot you a note in the chat. If you send me your let me share my screen real quick. That's
sure.
Okay. So I'll share my screen with you, and I want to share screen 1. And then I'll actually might even do a little bit of slide work if you want to see some stuff here. Okay,
Sure.
so I think Alyssa will really, really like this a lot. Check this out. So I worked with our design team because I wanted to do a card game in .NET.
Oh, these will be
So
super
Those are
helpful.
beautiful.
but wait, it gets better. You ready?
Oh, what?
Look at the face cards.
Nice.
They're all the .NET bot images. We actually have like if I can find a king. So there's a
Oh
king.
my goodness. These
There's a
are
This
amazing.
will go. I definitely need this because I have a workshop on functional programming with C#, and it's all card based,
Cool.
which I need to rewrite because we have C#9 now, and a lot of the things that I talk about either have shortcuts or don't exist or been moved. The cheese is moved.
I get it.
So
I am
yeah, it could use an update, and this would be a fantastic update for it.
cool. I just zipped it up, so I've got Alyssa's email. I'll send that over here in a
Thank you.
moment.
Yes. And
Yeah,
also
awesome.
Chad is asking, is that a GitHub repo? Like where your cards are? Yeah.
Don't think the cards are in a GitHub repo. I will put them in a GitHub repo. I have them in a storage account. I'll put them in a GitHub repo.
What was
I'm ahead
this?
of so,
What was this project that went in chat here?
pardon me?
Brady Gaster sample R?
Sampler.
Sampler.
SignalR?
Yeah. So Jeff asked to ask Brady about producing MIDI. I don't actually produce MIDI. I use MIDI. MIDI is the musical instrument digital interface. It's a really old standard that they just hit 2.0 after 30 some odd years. It's like literally one of like the oldest standards in computing. But I had this crazy idea after talking to Carl and Richard about essentially taking, like, if you think about the idea of live jamming with another musician, you can see my guitars behind me. You cannot see the synths behind my camera. But if you think about the idea of live jamming with another musician, like you kind of have to bend space time because what you need to do is to essentially you essentially need to like record the audio, ship the audio. Actually, you have to compress it, then you have to ship it, then you have to decompress it, then you have to play it. None of that happens in, shall we say, less than 7 milliseconds. Why does 7 milliseconds matter? 7 milliseconds is the average amount of time it takes for an untrained ear to notice a lag in rhythm or a lag in tempo. So if you think about a musician, like a drummer, it's like 2 milliseconds. So like it throws people off their rhythm. So I thought, well, forget all that. Let's do it with MIDI, because MIDI is essentially 3 series of digits between 1 and 127. It's a pretty small payload. So what I was doing is reading MIDI off of a MIDI device and then shipping it over HTTP with SignalR. And I did it using a sampler that I have and put the sampler on stage, hooked it up to the mic, put a web page on the screen that basically had a bunch of instruments, and people just started clicking the instruments. And we were playing music in Ignite. And what was cool was people were watching it online. So people online were doing it, and it was a complete cacophony. So it was a lot of fun.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
What?
Nice.
Joel Martinez did something with it. His was way better. His was a lot cooler. His actually worked really well. But we were going to do live jamming that way. But even if you want to send like ones and zeros over the wire, it's still too darn slow. But it was a cool demo. It was fun. And we did it again on the ASP.NET stand-up. So we can probably, Jeff can probably find the ASP.NET stand-up link. I was happy because Damien went. So to make Damien do that's pretty cool. Isaac is pinging me. I don't know why this is showing up here. So I have to close Teams. Thanks, Isaac. Thanks, buddy.
He's a
By the way,
troublemaker, that guy.
he's doing that because his wife made me this t-shirt. So,
Nice.
but yeah, I'll stop sharing. But I was going to show you. You asked me to show you something about hubs. Do you want to see some slides on
I
hubs?
so do. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, Isaac, stop IMing me now.
You can add screen back when you're ready.
Okay. You can add it back. Okay, let me close Teams since Isaac's just not going to listen. Let me go with do not disturb. He's not listening to the busy warning. Actually, it won't let me do that. Okay, oh, there it goes. Oh, it just closed. All right, there we go. Isaac can't inject now. So let me pull up these slides real quick, and these are really just kind of my walking slides with SignalR. I'll walk through a couple stuff. Does that still show up on screen for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Look right. I'm looking at the Twitch stream to see if you see it there. Oh, that's annoying. I'll just do it like this. How do I turn that off?
Hey,
Slideshow.
we got a rating party of 11 from Jeff Blankenberg. Welcome, Raiders.
Hey, thanks,
Hello.
Jeff. Appreciate that. Jeff
How do
over
I-
at
how do I-
Amazon.
How do I do that? What do I do to turn that off? Is that
Turn.
Will that help? Oh well, screw it.
There's a button at the top, I believe, that swaps.
There. That's better. Okay. Sorry. I've never presented before, not once. Okay. So Sam used some versions of these slides. So I'll go ahead and walk through them real quick. So, essentially you think about the idea of SignalR and how it does the transport negotiation is what it's called in SignalR. With LOM polling, you would have this concept, and this is what you would do when your PM would ask you, hey, they don't want to hit the refresh button. They want it to just update when, something happens. Oh. So the idea behind that would be you would just like send a request and you would listen, and then an event would happen and it would respond, and then you would immediately send another request. So that's kind of the idea behind LOM polling. So
every time someone talked about long polling, I just assumed it was like a normal like REST API where you're like, okay, so it's not at all like that. It's still,
it's similar to that. It's similar to that because you're just making a request and you're waiting and then you're getting. So,
okay.
Yeah. Service and events, a little bit better. The idea is you create what's called an event source. And essentially what happens is whenever the server has an event, it just pops it off to the client and sends a message. So this was kind of like, if you think about, back in 2012, show my gray, the WebSockets weren't that ubiquitous. So David and Damien kind of had the foresight. If you've never really talked to Damien, the guy can read the future. It's kind of cool. But he knew like WebSockets is not going to be the last cool thing to enable real time in HTTP. So we need to build this thing so it's flexible. He also knew that WebSockets, David knew WebSockets wasn't around. So we needed to back it up with things like service and events and LOM polling. So that's why that abstraction is there. So I used to say, people would say, what is SignalR? I would say it's basically an abstraction around, the process of picking the transport and sending the messages. If you have WebSockets, which most of us do these days, this is really what would happen. It would, when the negotiation would happen, it says, do you support WebSockets on the server? The server would say, do you support WebSockets on the client? We do indeed. We're going to switch protocols. We're going to go to WebSockets, and now we are going to party in real time.
I love it. Okay.
So that's kind of what happens whenever you've got, this. But there's something you need to know about that's extremely important. SignalR is as durable as the connection. Okay. Which means if a dinosaur eats the web server, you're not going to be connected anymore. Which means if you're on a mobile device, and you go into a tunnel, we actually have a name for that. It's called the tunnel effect. If you go into a tunnel and you lose your connection, none of those messages that were going to get sent to you are going to hit you. So you need to think about that. We've thought of some of those things for you, and I looked in your code and I noticed that you don't have what's called auto reconnect turned on. So that's one of the things we'll do today. If you can kind of see up here, we've got this with automatic reconnect right here. What that means, and I'm sorry, the font's whited out up there. But the idea is in the past, you would kind of have to monitor your connection. And if your connection like blew up or died or whatever, you would need to reestablish it. We don't want you to have to do that. So we gave you this concept of with automatic reconnect. And in addition to giving you with automatic reconnect, we gave you on reconnecting and on reconnected event handlers.
Oh, cool. Wait, is there any bad part of automatic reconnect? Like, why wouldn't you use it everywhere? Is there?
That's a great question. Is there any bad part of it? There's not really any bad part of with reconnect in SignalR on .NET Core. Okay. Now, if you Ed and I use SignalR, what we joke about in the team is SignalR OG, .NET Framework SignalR. And there was SignalR Premium. There's no such thing as SignalR Premium. Don't listen to them. So the idea behind SignalR OG was like, if you lost your connection, we would know that you lost your connection, and we would start to queue up all of those messages that you didn't get. What do you think that means on the server?
Oh, I mean, a buildup, right? Like, especially what if you never connect again?
You got it. So we would use lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of memory for those disconnected clients, because we were storing all that stuff up. We opted out of that. So you look at SignalR framework and you look at SignalR core, like not only in SignalR, from SignalR framework to SignalR core, carrier pigeon edition, we did a lot of changes. SignalR was essentially rewritten from the ground up. And the first thing that Fowler and Andrew Stanton Nurse and a lot of the devs on the team did was they said, let's really open this up now, and let's come up with a protocol for SignalR. So there's actually a doc in our GitHub repo that walks through the SignalR protocol, like how we like serialize messages, how we build things up, how we send things, and whatever else. And one of the chat's killing me right now. It's like killing me to keep talking. The idea behind core was like, when we built that protocol, you can go read the protocol. A good friend of ours, David Justice painted me, and he was like, hey, reading the SignalR protocol, and I've written a Go client for it, and I kind of wanted to, and I was standing in front of him. He was like, that was weird. And I was like, you wrote a Go client using our protocol? Like, it was like so exciting. So then Fowler wanted to see it. I think it was Go. It might have been Python. I can't remember. But you can look at the SignalR Hub protocol and write your own client and whatever you want.
Okay.
So
and so this, with automatic reconnect and the new protocol, is all with core, yes? Or was with automatic reconnect available previously?
with automatic reconnect is available in core.
Okay.
SignalR framework will try to do it on its own. You know, it'll try to resend those messages. SignalR core does not do that.
Okay.
So SignalR core, there's no concept of us deliberately trying to replay messages when a client disconnects and reconnects. And
so they just flutter off into the nothing, yes or no?
They flutter off into the nothing unless you write code
to catch them. So you can opt in to keeping them. Okay.
You can opt into keeping them, and that's when you want to look at your SignalR connection ID, like your client ID. That's when you want to like this client was connected. I want to store that client ID, and I always want to send a message to a client ID, which might raise a question. How would you send a message to a specific client?
Well, if they're in a group, you can say that group.
Well, we can do more than that. So these slides came from the illustrious Anthony Chu. So I got to give him credit, because these are just absolutely gorgeous slides. But I've stolen them and I'm going to use them. So these are all of your crazy 8 clients. In a perfect world, your game is wildly successful and you get all these different clients and they want to connect and they want to use it and all that jazz. But in some cases, you might want to not send messages to every single one. So let's say you do, like you want to do what y'all are probably doing, which is, clients.all.send message, and send message is like your method. You know what I mean? That's essentially when you would invoke invoke an event on the server that your clients are going to capture. But you're using all here. So every client wakes up and responds. That's usually okay if you want to like send a broadcast. But you don't want to do that in a game. You usually want to send a message to one user. So you'll see here that I'm saying clients.user sub Brady, send the message, just like before. I'm using the same method, but I'm just sending it to, one user instead of all users.
Is this getting into the dreaded identity that nobody will talk about?
No.
It's
because I'm not going to talk about it. But I have a guest for you that we'll talk about it. So we'll get to that. But no, you don't want to ask me about identity. It'll be a very quick conversation.
I won't ask you.
So in this case, you'll see here that we're sending to one user, but I've got 4 clients lit up. That's because each one of these clients has an independent connection ID.
Yeah, you lost me. If they have independent connection IDs, why are they user Brady?
Because I might open up. Well, here's a great example. I am logged into Twitch over here. I'm also logged into it on my phone. I'm also logged into it on my iPad. If you or Ed want to send me a message wait a minute, you don't send direct messages on Twitch, do you? If you
Yeah, you
could,
can.
if you wanted to send me a message and reach me wherever I am. If I'm not sitting in front of my desk, think of Teams. If Glenn needs to get in touch with me because I'm not answering his IMs, he wants to hit me on my phone. So, I need to have Teams running on my phone and on my PC and on my Mac,
Okay.
yada, yada, yada. I want to make sure you get that, because a client is not a user.
Yes.
Okay, cool. You know about groups.
Mm.
You want to send a message to Vegas, you do that. And then you can also say, you can also target a specific client, and that's when you would pass in what's called the connection ID. You know what I mean? And that connection ID is when you would actually target one of my clients. So you would target my phone, or you would target my whatever. So
You're saying within that group, or you're just talking about in general?
In general,
Oh.
groups, users, caller, other, et cetera, et cetera. So like you've got the concept of clients.other, you've got the concept of clients.caller. So I can fire an event on the client that called me, or I can fire an event on all the other clients,
Right.
or I can fire an event on Ed's clients. So, or I can fire an event on Ed's phone.
Yeah, this was the fun I had with the mobile responsive demo that I built, because when people signed in on their phone and it grouped them into these Android, iOS, Windows Phone, desktop users, I then had a dashboard where I could send messages to the groups and then exclude messages from other groups. So I would send a message like stand up to the iPhone users, and then to everyone but the iPhone users, I would make a joke about the people standing up. So they were clueless as to why everybody was laughing.
That's good.
And they were just standing in the room, like, with everyone laughing at them. And I would take turns. I would equally offend everyone in the room before I'd move on.
That's a great Mel Brooks move. I love that.
Thank you.
Now, you had asked about backplaning earlier.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about that just a wee bit too?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to dive right into the depths. So, there's just like any other tech, I'll quote Fowler. There are no issues in the SignalR repo. It's perfect. That's not true. It's not true for any tech. You know what I mean? And as Ed's probably, kind of alluded to, a SignalR hub is, it's a resident on your server. But in a situation like Crazy Eights, when you've got like a bajillion users, you're going to want to have servers, because you're going to want to scale that thing out, right? So it's kind of a thing you need to understand, that SignalR hubs are server bound. They live on the server itself. So the idea is if I send a message, and it's one server, I'm going to bounce that message out to all the clients that happen to be connected to that particular server. In a single server environment, that's totally cool. You know what I mean? And then this client sends a message and it goes back out, and then this client sends a message and it goes back out to all those clients as well. But then you are successful and you need to have something like a server farm. You know what I mean? So what ends up happening here is each client that sends a message to a server, the clients connected to that server get the messages. So you can see here that the clients that are hitting the servers are only talking back to themselves, because maybe I've got like a round robin, insert logic here. But the idea is like client A can't talk to client B because client B is on a different server. So you end up like not communicating. It's not good. So what you kind of have to do here, in the old days with definitely SignalR framework and SignalR core to some degree, is that you have to drop in what's called a backplane. So you add a backplane and then you can do crazy things. So the idea behind a backplane is it's gonna be behind all of those servers, and the idea is it's gonna take that message from that server, send it to the backplane, and then the backplane is gonna bounce it out to all the other servers. And once it does, like, Bob's your uncle, you can talk to all of your individual clients again.
Is he just another server?
Pardon me?
Is he just another server?
He could be. There in the SignalR framework era, there were three backplanes: Redis, SQL, and the Azure Service Bus backplane.
Mhm.
So Clemens Vasters, who was inside of I got the dev intersection logo on there, my bad. He was in the service bus team. He actually contributed some work on that on the SignalR backplane client. But later on, I've got some weird artifact on top of the slide, so I apologize to delete that later. We ended up creating this thing called the Azure SignalR service, because we had a lot of folks who were saying, we want to do this in Azure. We want to have something dedicated. And then when you get into the concept of Blazor apps, Blazor uses SignalR under the covers. And we wanted to kind of, make sure that your throughput was going to be awesome. So the idea here was that a lot of folks who were deploying, say, I'm an Azure person, so I deploy all my apps to app service. App service kind of has a front door in front of it, the way a lot of other hosting platforms do. And that front door, it's called, I think it's called ARR. And the idea behind it is it's essentially your reverse proxy. But if you have all these active connections going back to your web app, and your web app is also serving normal HTTP traffic, theoretically you could pound your server such that you could negatively impact the performance of the site. Not that SignalR is going to chew up stuff, but it's physics. If you clog the pipe, you clog the pipe. So the idea behind the Azure SignalR service is that you offload all of that WebSocket traffic to the Azure SignalR service, so that your app services and your AKS apps, those continue to just serve normal HTTP traffic. So the idea here is like I'm serving pages, and I'm also serving my hub. All of that traffic, normal HTTP traffic, WebSocket traffic, it's all going back and forth to that one server, or that series of servers. If you think about how like my web server should really just be doing like the munging and the HTML output, it would be great if I could take all that WebSocket traffic and just move it somewhere else. So the idea here is that now all of my web traffic continues to go up to my actual web server. And on the server side, the web server and the Azure SignalR service have this connection. The connection is actually SignalR, if you can believe that. So they have this connection. And then what happens is it basically tells your client, I want you to go over here for all of your WebSocket traffic, all of your SignalR traffic, and we'll communicate on the back. So you might have 100,000 people playing your game, but your web server only has like 5 or 6 connections back to the Azure SignalR service, because all it's doing is sending that particular traffic. It's highly optimized.
Can you give an example of why they need to talk to each other? The two things in the cloud. I don't why do they have a connection?
Well, the idea here is you're sending your, like, you would make an HTTP request here. Your web app would essentially say, here's like your bearer token for your identity. Then what happens is it basically says, I'm going to take this bearer token. I'm going to establish a trust relationship with this. I'm going to give you back a different bearer token that wraps your bearer token. And it basically says, I know that this client has authenticated over here. I'm going to take that authentication and send it over here, along with authentication I got back here, so that the Azure SignalR service knows that, the Azure SignalR service over here knows that this client was authenticated here. I have all of the creds that I got over here and all the connection information that I got over here. And I share that on the server side with the Azure SignalR service. That way, all of this WebSocket traffic is authenticated based on this. It gets very complicated very quickly. My apologies. But essentially what this does is it not only services as a backplane. So if I have multiple app services or multiple web servers over here, my SignalR service is my backplane. I don't have to do it with Redis. I don't have to do it with SQL. It's all kind of built in. And then we worked really closely. The SignalR team worked really closely with the Azure SignalR service team. And we just kind of made sure, like, if you're doing stuff on the server side and you end up just dialing in the Azure SignalR service, if you have, say, a connection string on your server side that goes to the Azure SignalR service, we go, oh, we see that you're using the Azure SignalR service. You don't have to do anything different. We'll just start using that.
What would you say the popularity of this way is versus Redis? Or I know you said there was a third way.
It's Redis. The 3 ways are Redis, SQL, and the Azure Service Bus. The Azure SignalR service is really one of the fastest adopted services I've seen. We have a lot of customers on it. This is the way I would recommend you, if you need to backplane out and you are running in the cloud, or you can run in the cloud, I would definitely recommend the Azure SignalR service. I've talked to a few customers who, one in particular, has a local Kubernetes instance, like they manage their Kubernetes inside of their corporate environment instead of using the cloud, but they actually use the Azure SignalR service as their backplane. So they're using Azure only for SignalR. Everything
Oh,
else is like on-prem,
okay.
and
Well,
and that works for them. It's kind of weird, but
it is,
Um,
especially when it sounds like you can bundle it all together with Azure,
right,
which
you can.
sounds easier.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's from a
Before you close
person.
that,
Oh yeah, what do you got, Ed?
I wanted to ask a question before you close all that.
okay.
Alyssa, are you familiar with PubSub or Publish Subscribe?
I mean,
No. Okay.
Brady said it earlier, so.
Okay. So it's kind of like the concept, if you think of like an Angular application, you have, the user clicks a button and it updates the UI somewhere. You might have the click event is being published and there's, other components subscribing to that event. So you might have, a window that closes, or maybe you delete a record and there's maybe the record goes away. That's one thing that's subscribed to the delete event. And then the count also updates because you removed that thing. So you've got two things that have subscribed to that click event.
Mhm.
So it deleted, the count changed, and maybe there's, some other components up in like the header of the application. Maybe there's a count up there, like you dismissed a notification, it changed. So that's kind of like the idea of a publish and subscribe. You have the event go out. There's all these things listening for that event to happen. If you could pull up the backplane again, Brady.
Sure.
So in a front end application, you might have several components that are like in scope of that button click. But then, you may have things that are nested way up in the top level of the layout of the application that need to change as well. Like I said, if you dismiss a notification, maybe there's something that's not in the current like scope of that user interface, but something in the application needs to change. That's kind of where a backplane comes in handy. So you need something to communicate to the other components that aren't in scope that need to also listen to that event. So you could think of those servers there as different components, and they initially, can you go to the first diagram, like where it's communicating? It's like kind of animated. Yeah.
That one, okay.
So you could think of like the individual items on the right, like if they were all publishing directly to the client, they would all the clients would not be able to listen to all of the servers publishing those messages. So the backplane acts as a publisher for those servers on their behalf, and it's publishing all of those messages between the clients and the servers.
Now, this really helped clear up a lot of things. And somebody actually asked a question in chat, which was kind of where my brain went, but then I just assumed that Azure handled it. The real Dave was like, so how does this overcome the situation where I have 3 servers with hubs, or do I just accept the black box, in reference to the Azure SignalR service solution? And I just assumed that Azure would handle it.
Azure handles it. Azure totally handles it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Azure,
I think for me,
Azure handles it. I mean, and I think like back to when we were talking about like when people started tinkering with SignalR in the beginning, they were like, I don't get it. I don't get it. It's like, you don't get it because like you keep thinking in that like HTTP is a stateless protocol, and I think it's one of those texts that's deceptively easy. It's like you look at it and you go, there's no way it's going to work, and it works, and you're like, okay, and you keep on going, and then all of a sudden something doesn't work. That's why I say, like, somebody asked me one time, they said, when should I not use SignalR? I go back to this slide right here. I think I said this in Barcelona one time, and I got a bunch of laughs out of it. It's a little intimidating. I said, like, my luck is generally really bad, and it's like really unpredictable bad. Like you step on the grate thinking it'll be funny, and the grate falls in, and you go under the street. It's like that kind of weird bad. So I said, like, let's say you are building something like a shopping cart. You know what I mean? and you want to continue to update, things in real time. Like, you want to continue to send messages back and forth, or you want to do something whenever somebody, processes their order. My luck would dictate that for 2 years, everything would work completely flawlessly. And then like a distributor would come along and buy like 3,000 of a particular thing, and their shopping cart would be like $100,000. And they would click the button. And at that moment in time, that would be the one moment they went into the tunnel.
Yeah.
And that connection would break and that order would go into the ether. Like that would be my luck. So what I tell folks is, if you think there is a chance that you're going to lose it and you don't want to lose it, don't use SignalR, because it's like you need to maintain that connection and you never know. You know what I mean? Like,
But you're
I have
saying with automatic reconnect and with like error catching, like couldn't you guarantee that you could still catch it and deliver that?
you could guarantee that you reconnect the connection. You cannot guarantee that the messages that got, it's like if I it's kind of like this. If I let me stop sharing and go back to the actual browser here. I'm trying to find my actual the actual thing here, but think about it like this. Let's say you are a SignalR, let's say I'm a SignalR client and I'm in the process of like, you can't hear me. See what happened? See what happened?
Why did you go away?